He stood barefoot on the edge of the porch, one hand resting on the cracked door frame, the other gripping his worn cloth bag. The evening air was thick with wood smoke and the smell of boiled rice. Through a half-open door, he caught a glimpse of something that didn't belong to him, something beautiful. A man sat cross-legged on the floor, a child curled in his lap, another laughing wildly as their mother tried to feed them both. The room wasn't fancy. The clothes were simple. But the way they looked at each other, that quiet, soft magic, it felt like a different world. For a second, he forgot his hunger, forgot the aching in his knees. He just stood there watching, his face half in shadow, a faint smile slipping across his lips. It was the kind of smile that knew it would never last. He knocked once. No one heard. He stepped back, ready to leave, when the woman finally opened the door. She didn't ask who he was. She didn't act scared. She simply walked out, poured some grain into his bag, nodded, and closed the door again. It was kindness, but it wasn't connection. As he walked down the dirt road, he whispered, "Maybe if I was born in a family like that, life wouldn't be this cruel." He didn't want riches, or fame, or respect. He just wanted what that man had: a lap to rest a tired child in, a hand to hold at night, someone to miss him if he didn't come home. He tightened his shawl against the wind. His stomach groaned again. But the hunger wasn't the worst part. It was the silence. Dinner was simple: millet roti, a bit of lentils, and pickle from a jar they'd been scraping since Diwali. The kids were still laughing from whatever nonsense they'd been whispering all evening. Their joy was loud, but his silence was heavier. The farmer sat cross-legged, chewing slowly, eyes flicking between the cracked ceiling and the tin plate in front of him. His wife caught it instantly. He always went quiet when something was wrong. She didn't ask, not yet. She just kept feeding the kids and waited. She knew the storm was coming. After the children were sent to bed, he finally spoke. Not dramatically, not with tears, just quiet, tired. "I'll have to borrow again, probably from Gupta at the shop." She didn't flinch, didn't lecture. She just nodded, wiped her hands on her sari, and asked, "How much?" "Maybe 1,000, just to get us through this month." That was the difference between love and comfort. She didn't panic. She absorbed it. Still, he hated saying it, hated needing help again. Every time he walked into that shop with his head down, something inside him chipped away. He knew Gupta wasn't cruel, but it was the look. That quick flicker in his eyes that said, "You again?" He glanced toward the window, the one that looked out at the main street. The shopkeeper's light was still on. His shelves always full. His accounts thick and neat. His kids wore shoes that didn't squeak with broken soles. "That man must sleep easy," the farmer muttered. "He's got real money, real stability." His wife said nothing. She just reached over, poured him the last of the buttermilk, and sat with him in silence. That's the thing about survival. It's quiet. But the panic underneath? That never rests. The train ride to the city was cramped, sweaty, and filled with noise that grated on his ears. The shopkeeper sat by the window, clutching his old leather bag, the one with fraying seams and ink stains. Inside it, his list: cotton rolls, thread, dye, 24 blouses, and just enough cash to gamble on keeping his little store afloat another month. By the time he reached the cloth market, his back ached, but his face was business. He walked into the wholesaler's go-down like he belonged there, nodding to the young man at the desk, adjusting his watch to look newer than it was. The room smelled of starch and money. Piles of fabric lined the shelves, workers shouting about shipments, while the owner, Mr. Rathi, sat like a king behind ledgers that looked thicker than a dictionary. Every 5 minutes, someone walked in to hand him a slip. 1 lakh profit from Surat. Goods delivered to Hyderabad. Advance received from Chennai. The shopkeeper smiled politely, but inside it stung. I work every day, he thought. Don't even know what a weekend feels like. I haven't seen a movie theater in 5 years. My wife says I'm always distracted. And for what? To sell 4 meters of cloth to someone arguing over 5 rupees? He looked down at his hands, dust-covered, cracked, while Rathi leaned back in a cushiony chair, sipping imported tea. Look at him, he thought bitterly. No dust on his shoes, no fear in his eyes. He placed his modest order, forced a smile, and left. But that night, back in his shop, surrounded by bills and unsold fabric, the shopkeeper barely slept. His mind kept running numbers, because when you count every rupee, peace becomes just another thing you can't afford. The message came just after lunch, short, brutal, and enough to kill his appetite in one line. Shipment damaged. Estimated loss, 7 lakh rupees. The businessman stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. His forehead broke into sweat, even in the comfort of his air-conditioned office. His manager kept speaking, something about insurance claims, maybe damage reports, but none of it landed. All he could hear was the sound of numbers burning. 7 lakhs, gone. And yet, 2 hours later, he was in front of his mirror, fixing his collar, tightening his cufflinks, adjusting his tie like a man rehearsing a lie. He couldn't cancel. Tonight's party was being hosted by none other than Rai Bahadur, the most influential name in the region. Skipping it would mean suspicion, weakness, and in his world, weakness was blood in the water. He arrived in a car that wasn't paid off yet, at a mansion that could house his entire factory floor. The lawn was glowing with chandeliers and soft music, the air thick with perfume and power. Officers in crisp uniforms, commissioners, retired judges, industrialists, all floating around Rai Bahadur like planets around a sun. He walked in, tried to blend, smiled at a few familiar faces, waited politely for his chance to shake Rai Bahadur's hand. It never came. The man was too busy laughing with politicians, sipping wine with men whose surnames came with legacy. The businessman stood at the edge of the crowd, drink untouched, watching the way people bent slightly forward when Rai Bahadur spoke, as if each word was made of gold. I thought I was powerful, he muttered under his breath, but compared to him, I'm invisible. In that moment, the loss didn't hurt as much as the reminder. No matter how high you climb, there's always someone looking down. The room was silent, soaked in velvet and gold, but Rai Bahadur's head was pounding like drums in an empty hall. The party was over. The compliments had faded. The important men had gone home, their polite laughter still echoing faintly in his ears. He sat by the window now, in a robe that cost more than most families made in a month, holding a glass he hadn't touched. His servant stood nearby with medicine, waiting for permission to speak, but Rai Bahadur just waved him away. The silence was heavier than the chandelier above him. He had everything they said mattered: power, name, respect. If he made a call tonight, officers would answer in seconds. But none of that cured the ache behind his eyes. None of that made his chest feel less hollow. And then, in the quiet, he heard it. A song. Not from a speaker, not from any room in the mansion. Outside, on the lonely road beyond the gate, a man walked with a stick, barefoot, singing softly to himself. His shirt was torn, his face gaunt, but his voice free. Rai Bahadur leaned forward, peering through the glass. It was a beggar. The beggar, the same man who'd looked through the farmer's window just days ago. The Bahadur stared at him for a long moment. No guards, no audience, just a man, walking with the sky above him and no mask on his face. He whispered to no one in particular, "Now that's freedom. That man carries no weight. He's not pretending. He's not trapped in this show." And just like that, the circle closed. The beggar wanted the farmer's joy. The farmer wanted the shopkeeper's stability. The shopkeeper wanted the businessman's success. The businessman wanted the Bahadur's power. And the Bahadur, he wanted to feel what the beggar felt. Everyone's chasing someone else's life, not realizing their own might already be someone else's dream.